is I'm giving them a clear instruction that I want them to move. That's what you do to your friends. You wouldn't actually kind of move them. You just say, you just set your fingers. I'm just setting my 2 fingers right here on their shoulders, and I'm just kind of informing them, and I'll see who moves. So she's moving more, so I'll stop moving him, right? And then I'll immediately back up and say, hey, can you take a sincere compliment? Cool, I like this one. Is she potty trained? Right? So you're just using Kino to open the set. They've figured out what I've done. So usually what happens is I'll open the guy and I'll get the girl's attention, and then I'll get the girl to get all excited. And once I get the girl excited, I'll actually step in between the guy and the girl and just kind of confront her in this real playful way. And when I do that and I really start flirting with her, the guy has usually figured out what's going on. Because now I'm flirting with her, right? And why would I flirt with her if I knew her? So, I guess theoretically, if I did it really quickly and then I left, they'd probably be like, who was that guy? But usually they figure out in the middle of the set that I actually didn't know anyone, which actually works in your advantage, right? Because it's a really cool, surprising thing. Poking people and touching people and making fun of them, don't try those same lines when you're not touching people, because you'll come across like a jerk. Because remember this is what you guys did probably in high school. You'd sit around with your good buddies at the lunch table and you just insult each other, like just stuff that you'd never say to anyone else, right? You guys know what I'm talking about? You would dig into each other, and that was actually, whether you knew it or not, that was your way of bonding and establishing how strong your friendship was, right? Because you guys would insult each other in ways you could never insult anyone else, right? It's establishing how strong the relationship is. And so if you're touching people in the group and then you're throwing out that kind of comments, these kind of jokes, they're going to say, oh, I get it. He's pulling us into his circle. We're a part of his team. We're a part of his world. Okay, that's funny. It's endearing. But if you don't set aside, if you don't kind of create that closeness before you use that type of material, you're going to just come off like a jerk. This is really important. So then I'm going to wrap around her hand, right? And I might even squeeze it. I'll give it a little squeeze, and she's not squeezing because she's feeling awkward. She's feeling awkward. But if she's feeling natural and she was attracted to me and I squeeze a little bit, she'd squeeze back. If she squeezes back, I'll move down to her fingers. This is much more, and that's much more sensual, right? It's much more, if you don't understand how sensual, make her embarrassed for her attraction for me, right? Now, a lot of guys out there, they do palm reading, they do these contrived Kino. I won't say don't ever do that, but I would say, if at all possible, do that when you're in a corner, in a quiet corner, alone. Don't do that in front of a group of people. Don't say, oh, let me see your palm. It's just because, this whole thing is going on. It's being put on public display, and two things are going to happen. Either she's going to lose her attraction, or worse, she has attraction for me, and she's regretting it. She's embarrassed. And you don't want to do that. So you always got to be discreet. That's actually the next idea, which is the idea of being dynamic. And we can use the same idea of holding hands. If I go and if I give her a little hockey check and I grab her hand, this is a good example of being dynamic. If I just grab her hand and I'm like this, it's just weird. It's weird, isn't it? So what I want to do is I want to be dynamic with her. I want to look at this as if it's a conversation. And it really is a conversation, actually. If I just touch her hand, I'm interested if she grabs it. So yeah, let's look at this. Can we get a close-up on this too? What I did is I set my hand here, and she kind of wrapped around it. That means what I'm doing is okay. So then I'm going to wrap around her hand, right? And I might even squeeze it. I'll give it a little squeeze, and she's not squeezing because she's feeling awkward. She's feeling awkward. But if she's feeling natural and she was attracted to me and I squeeze a little bit, she'd squeeze back. If she squeezes back, I'll move down to her fingers. This is much more, and that's much more sensual, right? It's much more, if you don't, right? So if I want to grab a girl I know really well, I'll just grab her hand like this. Feels kind of natural, right? What I'm doing is I'm actually sliding in. I always want to be sliding into a touch, and I always want to be pulling away. And the same thing if I put my arm around her. We're kind of moving. Let's move over here. I'm chasing her down, you guys. It's terrible. The same thing is true if I'm going to put my arm around her. I'll kind of slide in. I'll just slide a little bit on her shoulder, and then if I'm going to take it off, I'll slide it down. Right? You don't ever plop your hand. You don't ever do this to someone you're comfortable with. It just feels really weird, right? But if it's a girl you're with for a long time, you just walk up and you put your arm around her. It's really, really natural. So, and you guys should really think about that, because taking this frame of a woman you're already dating. How do I interact with a woman that I'm already dating? It's pretty simple. I kind of lead, but I expect her to participate. So I create a lot of different types of contact and a lot of different activity. I create it psychologically, but I don't do the whole kind of physical creation. And she's giving me an IOI, I'll reward her and I'll squeeze back. So it's like give and take. You know, she's showing she's interested in me, then I'll show her that I'm interested in her back. And it really is this whole conversation. It's a much more powerful. In fact, it's really amazing. Like, you know, especially if you're sitting down with a woman, you might touch her knee, you might just touch her thigh a little bit, you might, touch her shoulder, you might do things like that. But you really have no idea how comfortable she is. She might be uncomfortable. It's really hard to tell, right? So here's what I do. There's a lot of touching going on, and there's all kinds of stuff going on, and it seems like it's okay. She hasn't said no, so she's not so uncomfortable. But some women don't like to say no. They might just be feeling uncomfortable and just decide they don't like you. So what I'll do is every once in a while, let's say, I don't know, probably wouldn't touch her like 4 times somewhere else without just checking with her hand. Because when I check in with her hand, I know instantly how she's felt about all the other touching we've been doing. Because if I've been doing this and it's making her feel uncomfortable and it's a little creepy, when I go to grab her hand, I'm not going to get a squeeze. I'm not getting a squeeze. That's her telling me, a pretty small window. I mean, realistically, if you've been touching a woman and then 10 seconds later, and she's been feeling uncomfortable, 10 seconds later, you touch her hand and you realize, you don't get the squeeze, you realize you kind of overextended your bounds a little bit. You just step back a little bit. But, I mean, realistically, there has been damage done. I mean, you'll probably have to spend more time talking to her to make her feel comfortable. My thought is to always err, when you're not in a relationship with a woman, always err on the side of being discreet. Women, for how uncomfortable you can make them feel before they'll even kind of react to it. Because keep in mind, we're assuming this is a woman who's attracted to you. I mean, obviously, if you're doing a public display of affection, even if it's something like holding a hand, it's a woman who's feel uncomfortable for kind of reciprocating your attraction. You've anchored this idea that getting physical with you is going to cause discomfort, right? Because you don't necessarily want the whole group knowing who your target is, right? Sometimes it's obvious, right? Sometimes there's one girl who's much better looking than the other girls. A lot of times it's not so obvious. And so great, the more I can, and usually there are some differences. Usually I won't, the target I'll kind of Kino last, or I'll do these kind of, kind of when you poke girls in the belly, you're kind of almost putting them in their place a little bit. There's almost this element of almost like patting on the head. You're kind of maybe lowering her value a little bit. You're kind of putting yourself on a little bit of a higher social status than her when you just kind of poke a girl in the belly. It's kind of like you might do it to your sister or something like that. But I definitely wouldn't go into my target and just kind of put my arm around her, right away if I can avoid it. Because you don't want to go into the target first. You know what I mean? You kind of want to get the whole group liking you, get her liking you, and then you want to show her after that you actually might be interested in her, kind of on a physical level.